Spot on Chess presents more Grandmasterly fireworks from Grandmaster Andy Woodward. Hold on to your seats because you're in for one heck of a ride. Hello everyone, welcome back to Spot on Chess. Today we're going to look at a game from the 5th round of the US Chess Championship. Samuel Sivan was playing the white pieces against Andy Woodward, and he elected for the English opening. And as we saw in round 2, Andy Woodward plays quite aggressively against the English. And today was no different. He went at it. And what we end up with here is a reverse Sicilian dragon. Now right here, d3 is a rather common move, knight c3, etc. But b3 from Keto. And we see that Black has a solid setup, maybe a little loose on the white squares. And this seems to create a hole at d4, but Samuel Sivan clarifies that issue with that move d4 is now that gets liquidated off. There's an attack against the queen and just blocking with the knight, although it is a loss of time. The knight moved to d4, now it's moving back. We see the queen avoid an exchange of queens down this D file here, so it gets off the D file and goes to the C file. Bishop to D6, both players have the bishop here. Now that A pawn would love to dislodge the knight on B6, and so Andy Woodward does not allow that. Both of these GMs are very skilled. And right here we have centralization of a rook, which is immediately hit, begging the question why we went there to begin with, and now it shifts over the D file to hit the queen. The queen lines up with the bishop here on B4. And the bishop here was asked the question, move it or lose it, so it moved. Moves again. Knight to D4, rook centralized. Queen comes over. And here, this is where it gets real interesting, right here. Andy Woodward steps into a potential discovery. If this knight moves, this bishop here on b2 will be attacking the queen over here on this e5. And he's not afraid. He's looked into the tactics, and he's a strong calculating machine. Here he takes advantage of the pin on this e pawn to the queen on e3, and exploits it by playing the knight to d5. Obviously, you don't want to capture because then you lose your queen. Queen moves, and the pawn goes lost, but there's that discovery. And the bishop is now defended by this queen here on f2. This bishop attacks the queen on e5. And there's an exchange of rooks, so we don't lose an exchange because of that knight that had been attacking the rook that stood on d8. But a forcing move, the most forcing kind of chess move you can play, a capture with check. Beautiful move right here. Beautiful move. He just takes the pawn with his queen. And here Samuel decides to get rid of that annoying bishop on b4. But had he captured the queen, well, there's a fork. King and queen are attacked. King moves, then there's another fork. Bishop on e4 is attacked, and rook on d1 is attacked, and the knight's recaptured on c6, and Black stands rather well in the world with the extra pawns. So that explains why that move wasn't played. Knight takes instead. Knight takes, no more light squared bishop, which is going to leave the white king a little bit weak. The rook comes up with an attack, but here we go. The queen goes to the back rank, giving a check of the second most forcing kind of move, a check. Third kind would be a capture, and the fourth would be a move that improves your position or box only moves. First type, as we already discovered earlier, would be a capture with check. Right here, there's recapture. So the forces are even, but we see here that white has a bishop that stands on the dark squares, and black, Mr. Woodward, has a bishop that stands on the light squares. Now this will favor, in the middle game, the side that is attacking, because the other player is essentially playing a piece down. These two bishops will never meet in combat on the chessboard. So here we have centralization of the queen. The queen is now on the d file, creating a battery with the rook on d4. And Mr. Woodward decides, well, I'm going to create some interference in communication between the rook and the queen. Once that rook goes to the 7th rank, a pig on the 7th is very powerful. But here we go. Rook lines up on the e file, so there could be potential fireworks here. And there's that pawn trying to leverage an attack against the black king on g8. And here we go. There's that interference move. Now the queen on d2 can no longer look at the rook on d7, but Grandmaster Xiaobian decides he's going to give up the exchange to get some attack against the black king. But Andy Woodward has a solution to that. He's just going to give a check, forcing move, king moves, and now there's a recapture on d5. And if we have any capture that takes place on d5, it would be an endgame with rook versus bishop and extra pawns, and Andy Woodward would just mop up there. So Samuel Savan was resigned here at move 36. Just to give an example of some play that might happen, you could never touch that pawn on f6 with your bishop because the pin would be deadly. You'd just lose the piece because of that pin. And let's say you take the pawn, they take back, and then you play a move like, I don't know, just give an example, king g3 to hopefully catch the pawn with your bishop. Well, then they could defend it, but better yet, they could probably just give you a check and fork you and your pawn on b3, and then one of these black pawns is going in for a touchdown and you're dead lost. So this explains why here, Samuel Savan resigned the game. Grandmaster Andy Woodward shows very good tactics in his games. He had that draw in round 2 against one of the top players in the world, a player of historical note, Fabiano Caruana, who played for the World Chess Championship in 2018. And so here we come to the conclusion of this game, the end of this game. Beautiful game. Congratulations, Grandmaster Andy Woodward, and thank you for the fireworks.